Hello and welcome to TF1, a show where I get to share my passion of motorsport and Formula 1 specifically with you. Yes, you, the person who secretly likes F1 but is too ashamed to admit it. My name is Tinus Ferreira and I would just like to begin today by saying thank you for the really nice feedback that I received after the first episode as well as the review. And I purposely say review in singular because this is what I received. What an incredible podcast. Hashtag Leclerc forever. Now, I mean, if that isn't a winning the review lottery, then I don't know what is. Anyways, thanks to Miss Mary C for that masterpiece of a comment. And because of you, I've basically decided to launch a new initiative, and I'm calling this the TF1 Top 10s. It's basically a series where I will rank different aspects of Formula 1. This week, I'll be starting off by doing a list of the top 10 current drivers driving in F1 based on a few different criteria, which would be attack, defense, speed, and overall temperament and just general behavior. I'll also maybe just try and explain each of the four, just sort of for those that don't really watch F1 that often. So in terms of attack, I'll be thinking about, how aggressive they are in terms of overtaking, just their driving style in general. How do they approach a lap? How do they approach qualifying? What's their general mindset in terms of how aggressive they're going to be and how aggressively they're going to attack a race? Defense is basically the opposite of that. The main thing for defense is basically how difficult is it for someone to get past a driver? If a driver makes it impossible to get past, then he's a very good defensive driver, especially if, for example, his car is actually slower than the one behind, but he still manages to keep the car behind him. The third one is speed. That's self-explanatory. Basically, what we're going to be looking at is qualifying pace and just how often the guy can pump in the fast laps, lap after lap after lap, and just put pressure on the people in front of him, or just, basically driving away from everybody else. And then the last thing is temperament, which it's basically how someone reacts in those pressure situations. Are they calm? Do they spiral out of control? Do they make stupid decisions? Do they drive into other cars? Sebastian Vettel, I'm looking at you. Yeah, so just a general idea of the driver's temperament and how the driver applies it in a race or in a pressure situation. So I think that's the best way of explaining that. Now, before I start with my list, I would just like to clarify that I did not consider any of the rookie drivers, just because I haven't really seen enough of them to form an opinion. Therefore, any Lando Norris, George Russell, Antonio Giovinazzi, and Alex Albon fans, you can stop listening now and go do something productive, since you will get no joy here whatsoever. Alright, and my number 10 driver on my list is Robert Kubica. Now, the old dog is back in the car, and it's going to be super fascinating to see what he can achieve over the year and whether he can drag that woeful Williams out of 19th place. So in terms of attack, I don't think Robert Kubica is really the most aggressive driver of his time. He grew up with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, and I think Hamilton out of the three was by far and away the most aggressive, with Kubica probably falling somewhere in between the two, I would imagine. But overall, not really known for his super aggressive driving style or for overtaking people left, right, and center. In terms of defense, similar story, I think. He's a very good defensive driver, and I don't think it's easy to pass him. But again, he's not really known for being that wall of a car where nobody can ever get past him. I think the area where Kubica really shined over time was just his speed, where especially when he was in his prime with BMW Sauber, I think 2008 and 2009, he was really a quality driver and could really quite often put that car in places where it shouldn't have been, just based on pure qualifying performance. So I think that's definitely the most positive attribute that Kubica has. And then lastly, in temperament, I think he's a wise old fox, especially now after everything that he's been through with the accident. I think he has a really good head on his shoulders, and he's always had a really good head on his shoulders. And I think under pressure, he's really someone that will take the right decision and not do something irresponsible or something that could possibly damage his chances in the race or in future races. So for number 9, I've picked Carlos Sainz. I think just he's a very, very promising young driver, and he's shown himself to be, I think, quite the all-rounder. I don't think he has a standout quality as some of the others in this list might have, but he really is someone that doesn't have any major flaws in the way he approaches the race or in the way he drives. So in terms of attack, I mean, Carlos is a solid attacker. He's not really famous for overtaking cars, but I think when he does get the opportunity, he does tend to go for it. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't pay off. We've seen also some spectacular accidents where Sainz was involved. So I do think it is something that he can definitely improve on in terms of his style. And again, the same for defense. He's a good defensive driver, but again, not someone that's where it's a skill that's notably elevated above some of the other drivers or some of his peers. In terms of speed, I think he's really impressed me there. He is very, very fast, and I think you need to keep in mind that he outqualified Verstappen when they were teammates in Toro Rosso, and I think with all of the hoo-ha about Verstappen going on at the moment, for him to have that over him is quite an achievement, and I think it's a real testament to how fast Carlos Sainz actually is. And I think also a testament for how fast Nico Hülkenberg is, but we'll get to that a bit later. In terms of temperament, Carlos is quite a calm guy. I think he doesn't really spiral out of control like Mr. Verstappen does on occasion. And I think he knows when to push and when not to push the car. I really do think it's something that he can still improve, obviously, but I really do see Carlos Sainz as being a driver for the future. And I think if he gets the right equipment and the right team around him, he can really be a bit of a dark horse in terms of winning a championship or in terms of challenging for a championship. Now, my number 8 choice might be surprising, but my number 8 driver, or top 8 driver for 2018 or 2019, is Valtteri Bottas, for the following reasons. Now, in terms of attack, he was quite aggressive in his youth. I understand. I haven't watched that many young Valtteri Bottas races because, to be honest, I didn't know who he was until he entered Formula 1. But I guess if you measure him against Hamilton and Verstappen, he's not aggressive at all, really. I think Australia did do some favors in terms of changing that perception possibly. But I think over the next year, it's going to be really interesting to see if he can really start stepping up in terms of attacking and putting in the hot laps and really, really pushing the front runners in terms of his aggression. With defense, he's actually a very good defender. If you look at some of the defending he's done against, especially Vettel, I think in Sochi 2017 when he was in the lead and Vettel was all up the back of him, he has done a good job of keeping cars behind him. And then obviously last year he was this amazing rear gunner for Hamilton, where he basically was just making his car as wide as possible and keeping Ferraris behind him, and I think frustrating them to no end. So I think Valtteri is quite a good defensive driver, and I think he has some real good skill. Speed, it's quite simple. I think Bottas is fast, but he's not the fastest. I think there are drivers that are faster than him, but Bottas can still put in the good lap here and there when he has to. Temperament, there's a bit of a question mark for me here, just because of how he fell away last year when he just really imploded mentally after things not having gone his way earlier in the season. And this was slightly concerning for me, but I guess time will tell. He seems revitalized. He seems ready for the year. So again, if he can show us this year that he can fight, he can come back and he can keep pace with the champions such as Hamilton and Vettel over the year, then I mean, good for him, and I'm going to look forward to see him. And who knows, maybe next year is going to be way, way up the rankings. I can already see the angry mob running at me in the distance with flames and pitchforks and shouting, and how can Bottas be this low? He's a Mercedes driver and he was doing so well in Australia. So for me, he just lacks that little bit of magic dust that some of the other drivers have. He's good at what he does, but he doesn't have that X factor where you think that guy is going to be a world champion. Similar, I think, for me in terms of maybe Nico Rosberg, who turned out to be a champion, it turned out. But where Rosberg was a very, very good driver, but he was never at the apex of what a Formula One driver could and should be. So I think Bottas falls into that category a bit. But again, if he can show me this year that that's not the case, I would fully here for it, and I would happily eat some humble pie at the end of the season. Okay, number 7, I've given to one of my personal favorite drivers, Nico Hülkenberg. Now, I think before I start, it was actually quite interesting over the past week where I saw on social media that, well, I think a German newspaper reported that Nico Hülkenberg has an outside chance of maybe being in the running for the other Mercedes seat at the end of the year. So that's basically then along with Valtteri Bottas and with Esteban Ocon, who's currently the reserve driver for Mercedes. Now, I feel just the fact that he is being mentioned for the seat is absolutely correct, and he deserves it because of well, I'll now discuss his attributes, but I really do feel that he is an underrated driver and that he deserves more than what he got in his career thus far. So in terms of attack, Hülkenberg is not that aggressive, but he can be, and he can make a move stick if he needs to. So he can really turn it up when the moment requires it. And I think that's a good characteristic to have. In defense, he's a very, very good defender as well. And he's a very fair racer, which I respect. And I think something that someone like Max Verstappen can learn from, because Hülkenberg will admit defeat when he needs to, and he can defend hard when he has to. And I think that's very good of him. He is so underrated in terms of speed and how consistently he can produce the speed. And I've mentioned it earlier when I was discussing Carlos Sainz, but Hülkenberg out-qualifying Sainz this consistently and being faster than Sainz across the race has just been very telling of how talented he is and how consistent he is and how good of a driver he actually is. And I really do think that given the right equipment, Hülkenberg can be a multiple world champion. I guess it is slightly late now. I think he's 30 years old now, but still, I do think, I just imagine putting Hülkenberg in a Mercedes next to Hamilton, and I really do think you can see some fireworks. If you want to disagree with me, but I really don't think the facts are on your side. Sorry, poor listener. Then lastly for Hülkenberg, in terms of temperament, he's quite a relaxed cat, but not that that's a bad thing. But I guess you do sometimes need that fire in the belly, and you need to get hot under the collar sometimes to really, when going gets tough or when you really need to pull something out, you need that fire to get you through. And on occasion you have seen it, but I really do think, if Hülkenberg was more in the thick of things, he really would be able to rise to the occasion. So, Nico Hülkenberg in 7th, he should and he can really be much higher on this list if he gets the right equipment and if things fall his way. So Renault, you need to listen to me. Cyril, Abiteboul, you need to listen to me. You need to get Nico Hülkenberg the car that he deserves. You need to do it now. All right, number 6 on my list is Kimi Räikkönen. The wily old fox. He's the veteran of the current grid, and he is still on his day. What a quality driver he is, and what a good all-round driver he is. I think for Kimi Räikkönen, basically, the only thing you need to mention is his speed. I think on his day, there wasn't anyone faster, especially when he was driving for McLaren in 2005 and 2006. If he had a more reliable car in 2005, he would have won that championship over Alonso. And that's saying something, because Alonso was incredible during those years already. But, he had such consistent pace, and he was such a solid attacker and defender. And he's always calm and cool in the car. I really do think that, and again, you guys can disagree with me, but I think he's going to do better at Sauber relatively than what he did at Ferrari, just in terms of outperforming the car and putting in good performances. Where, if you think about it, every time he wasn't in a Ferrari, Kimi Räikkönen actually performed amazingly well. Obviously, when he was at McLaren, he was a superstar. And then he signed for Ferrari, and then he did win the championship in 2007, but that was more, he was consistently fast, but McLaren sort of threw that one away with the infighting between Hamilton and Alonso. And then when he left and came back to Renault, he was again incredibly fast when he was driving for Renault or Lotus. I can't remember when they were Renault and when they were Lotus, but in any case. And then when he signed for Ferrari, all of a sudden he just couldn't produce those performances again. So I think, and I wonder whether it's something about how the team is run, or how the structure of the team works, or the pressure, where he just doesn't respond well to that environment. So I'm really, really curious to see how Kimi Räikkönen is going to do Sauber, where he is allowed to be a bit more relaxed and to just drive the way he wants to drive. But yeah, Kimi Räikkönen is still a quality driver, but he is getting on, and I do think he's lost a bit of that razor edge he had when he was a bit younger. All right, my number 5 driver might come as a bit of a surprise, but I guess not too big of a surprise. It's Mr. Daniel Ricciardo, or Mr. Daniel Avocado, as people keep calling him. To be honest, I don't know why people find it so funny, but I guess it's cute. I mean, the small child and avocado and Daniel Ricciardo, and people just love this whole debacle. But in any case, Daniel Ricciardo is an attacker. He's an attacker. He's an attacking driver. And many people argue that he is the best overtaker. Now, I don't really know about that. I think Verstappen and Hamilton maybe have something to say there. But in terms of being late on the brakes, I think Ricciardo, there's no one better. The control he has, and to really just brake that extra 10, 20 meters later than everybody else, he really has mastered that skill. But other than that, I don't think he's such a creative overtaker, if that makes any sense, where, I mean, he gets the job done. He can outbrake you, but then when you need to sort of get a bit funky or a bit creative like Alonso used to do, then I don't really know how good he is wheel to wheel, but I mean, he still is an amazing attacking driver and a very, very good overtaker. In terms of defense, I mean, I guess it's okay, but I can't recall any race where I was like, Daniel Ricciardo keeping the cars behind him, basically defending like his life is depending on it. I really haven't seen or can't remember a race like that. If any of you can, please comment on it on Twitter and let me know, and I'll go watch it, and please change my mind there. In terms of speed, Ricciardo is fast. I think he can pump in the fastest laps, on a Sunday afternoon, and he did beat Vettel in 2014 in qualifying, which I guess is quite impressive. But I mean, who knows where Vettel was in 2014 in terms of his head, and he wasn't really keen on Red Bull anymore, to be honest. But it's still a feather in his cap that he did beat Vettel over a season. So yeah, good for Danny Rick. On the other hand, he did lose quite badly to Verstappen last year in terms of qualifying, which was interesting to see. But then again, the same argument can be made where I don't think Ricciardo was very happy at Red Bull last year, just in terms of where his head was at. So I don't think he was really pushing to be that, well, he was, I guess, pushing to be competitive, but I don't know, he just wasn't committing to the team in the way that Verstappen was at that point. And then lastly, I think it will be super interesting to see how Ricciardo qualifies when measured against Hülkenberg, because as I've mentioned, I think Hülkenberg is very underrated in terms of his speed and in terms of his consistent speed. So to see how Ricciardo matches up against Hülkenberg over a season is probably going to make or break his career, to be honest. I think it's such an important season for him actually to showcase his talent to the top teams. And then in terms of temperament, I think Ricciardo is surprisingly calm in the car. I mean, he's quite a character outside of it, but when he's in the car, he's always measured on the radio, and he doesn't seem to take any rash or strange decisions. So I think that's a very, very good quality that he has, and really makes him a good driver. Now, you all are going to kill me, and I know the angry mob. Again, I can see the angry mob approaching, but my number 4 driver of the 2019 grid is Sebastian Vettel. Now, you guys can comment all you want, and you can fight me in the comments, but you need to hear me out. Okay, obviously, the obvious things. He's incredibly fast as a driver. I think he's an excellent qualifier. He has beaten his teammates consistently, basically in every season that he's driven, except obviously the 2014 year with Ricciardo. But as I mentioned, we don't really know where he was and where his head was at during that season. And he's an incredible front runner. And I think this is probably the best Vettel quality, and what basically was the main reason that he won the 4 championships. Obviously, except for the fast Red Bull, but in his prime years was the fact that when he was on pole position and when those race lights went off, he can just jump into the lead and just drive off into the distance. And he has an incredible ability to put in fast laps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 laps, right at the beginning of a race, and just build that gap and that safety cushion. And that's why I think he was really an incredible front runner, and he's one of his best attributes, I think, as a driver. In terms of attack, I do think that's where he falls flat on his face a bit, especially over the last few years. He's clumsy, wheel to wheel. He's made so many mistakes. He just doesn't have that natural, judgment or ability to be able to spot what the best thing to do would be in sort of an overtaking situation. And I don't think he has the tools to get through drivers that are as fast as he is, or faster than what he is. In terms of defense, I think sort of similar. He's not really a noteworthy defensive driver. He's not like an Alonso or even a Verstappen, I guess, where they just make it impossible to pass you and it frustrates you till no end. And then I think also something where Vettel has been struggling a bit over the last few years is his temperament and his frustration that he shows during races and after races, where he gets angry and he gets hot under the collar. I think a few examples that guys can go check out is obviously Baku 2017, where he drove into Hamilton. I mean, what a bizarre incident that was. Germany 2018, where he crashed out. Monza 2018, where he spinned and he was just spinning up his wheels and there was just smoke everywhere. And the Italians were like, what's going on? So Vettel, he has his amazing weekends where he's just untouchable, but he's become quite an inconsistent driver, which is interesting to see. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see how he deals with his brand spanking new teammate, which brings us to number 3, and that is Charles Leclerc. I'll admit it's a bit of wishful thinking from my side at the moment, because he's only been driving for a year, but I believe that he has the goods based on his performances last year. He can be an incredible champion, and he's fast. He consistently qualified that Sauber where it shouldn't have been last year. Ericsson was looking bewildered at Leclerc's speed on some weekends. I do think there are still tracks where he struggles a bit. I think Australia and Melbourne was one of those tracks, so expect to see him a bit faster in Bahrain. I really do think it's going to give Vettel a few headaches. In defense, it's the one area where I will reserve a bit of judgment still, because I haven't really seen him in sort of that hot wheel-to-wheel action, or maybe I have, but I've forgotten. But he's not really standing out to me yet as an incredible, noteworthy defender. But again, let's see how the year unfolds. And then I think his best quality by far is his temperament, where, if you just look at his GP2 years and the year he won the championship there, where, his father passed away and 2 days later he won the Baku GP2 race. How incredible is that? And what a show of mental fortitude that is. So I really do think he has the goods to be consistently under pressure and still be able to deliver really, really good performances. Now we're getting to the top 2, and I guess probably the 2 most obvious choices for most of you listening. Number 2 is Max Verstappen. And all of the Verstappen lovers, you guys can go jump. He's not as good as Lewis Hamilton yet, and you can argue with me about it, but in any case, we can talk about it later. Max Verstappen is basically attack. He is a very, very good overtaker. He's quite creative with his overtaking, which I think is very important. And I do think he has the ability to outdrive his car. Now, when I say outdrive his car, it's basically something that I've mentioned with Charles Leclerc, as well as putting your car into spots on the grid where it shouldn't actually deserve to be. So it's just basically your talent as a driver being so good that you can actually outdrive your competition just based on skills and not necessarily with how fast your car is. And I do think Max Verstappen has that, and I think he showcased that in Australia actually last week. In terms of speed, I think he is very fast, but not, I think, as fast over one lap as Vettel and Hamilton. And also, I don't think that's consistent. So he has times when he can really put in a blinding lap, but then other times where you just can't unlock the pace of the car over one lap. And I do think that's something he can still work on, but I guess in terms of his attacking style, it's probably going to be something that will develop over time. And he is, let's be honest, Max Verstappen is a very good defensive driver. He is very effective and he makes it very difficult for drivers to overtake him. But I don't like his style very much, to be honest, because I do think he bends the rules slightly with his whole 2 movements per defensive move thing that he does. Sort of, he really, really pushes the boundaries of what should be legal. And I do think the top drivers have allowed him to get away with it up to now, because Max Verstappen has never really directly been in the championship fight. But if Red Bull is as fast as people think they are this year and Max Verstappen is in the fight, don't think Hamilton and Vettel are going to allow Verstappen to pull those moves. I promise you, there's going to be an accident sometime throughout this year where Verstappen is going to pull some defensive trick and the other top drivers aren't going to stand for it or aren't going to relinquish their position that easily. So I think watch the space, but I really do think that's something that's going to happen this year. And then Verstappen is going to have to reevaluate the way he approaches his driving style. Okay, last but not least, my number 1 driver is, and I've already given it away, I think, is Lewis Hamilton. And I've mentioned on the previous episode that I am a Hamilton fan and don't think that I'm biased, that I'm biased by putting him in first on my list. Well, I guess I am slightly biased, but I really think Hamilton at the moment has the facts and the performances to back up his position on this ranking. I mean, in terms of attack, that was sort of, I guess, his main, well, not really, I guess, speed-wise, but he's always been seen as a really, really good attacking driver and an excellent overtaker. I mean, especially in 2007, 2008, people couldn't believe how this rookie was able to overtake such experienced drivers and give Alonso, someone of Alonso's caliber, that much trouble in 2007. And it's something that we haven't seen that much recently, just because of how dominant the Mercedes car has been. So he hasn't really been required. It hasn't been required of him to overtake that aggressively recently. But I do think he still has that capability, as we saw last year in Monza, where he overtook Vettel like that, or where he makes his overtaking moves, he makes them stick. And I do think that is a very, very important quality that he has. And Hamilton is just unbelievably fast. I really do think, other than maybe Ayrton Senna, I don't think there's been a better qualifier than Lewis Hamilton. The amount of times he can just produce a lap that's half a tenth or 6/10 faster than his teammate and just, outdrive his car and just put his car on pole when his car shouldn't have been on pole position. It's just an incredible quality that he has and has really bolstered his career up to now. And obviously, in terms of race pace, he also can put in incredible laps consistently, one after another, which you see, I think, similar to Vettel when he's in front. You can just pump in those laps and get out ahead before anyone can fill up his mirrors. As a defensive driver, I think Lewis Hamilton is good. I don't think he's the best. I think the best defensive driver I've ever seen was probably Fernando Alonso. So yeah, I think Hamilton can defend well, but I think he's become more wise in recent years, where if he feels that he doesn't have to defend tooth and nail for his life, then he will let another car pass to ensure that he gets over the finish line and that he gets the points that he wants. And I think that sort of ties in to his temperament, where he really has an incredible temperament now. I think in the beginning of his career, it was a bit of a problem and he was really hot-headed and he made stupid decisions. But now he's really quite wise and he picks his battles and he knows what to do. He knows what to do and what's the best thing to do in sort of the under pressure situations. And I think that just makes Hamilton an incredibly complete driver, and that makes him my number 1 driver of the Formula 1 grid for 2019. Now, if you don't agree with me, again, I'll be happy to argue it out with you on Twitter. So please do so, and please send me a message and then let's have a constructive chat. All right, so that's my list. If you agree with it, good for you, and I applaud your insight and wisdom. If you don't agree, please tweet me and we can argue it out, as I've mentioned before. Please also subscribe, comment, and rate the podcast on all of the main podcasting apps, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker. I'm also on YouTube, so go and find me there. Basically, if you search TF1, you will find it somewhere. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll be back next week for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Bye.